here, I just want you to give it up for Yvonne, all right? Give it up for Yvonne. We all love Yvonne. She's serving us back there with all that good food, and she's going to be working on lunch at 12:15, all right? So thank you, Yvonne. We appreciate it. All right, Door of Hope ladies. All right, led by Yvonne. All right, thank you. All right, those of you that are watching online, welcome back. And the rest of you, if you want to find your place to sit down. If you are watching this on YouTube today, and we would love to hear from you, we really would. So I'm just going to say, if you are watching this and you want to actually put in some comments there on YouTube, we would love to hear from you. If I get those comments, and Mike's working the sound. Would you give it up for Mike, by the way? He's running this thing. Mike's going to see what he can do to bring your comments to me, and I'll share them with the group publicly, all right, if you want to post something online. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got about another 50 minutes to go before lunch. Can we make it that long? All right. If not, remember the first temptation we talked about. What was that? Instant gratification. Okay. Before I jump into our being section, I want to just mention very quickly the leadership program that I offer to people wanting to take their leadership and mountain climbing, kind of combine the two. I have brochures here called Epic Adventure. I do this for men only in August. We have a trip in August coming up. And if you're interested, pick up the brochure. There's a website. Those of you watching online, you can go to my website, which is lukekipford.com/epic. All right, lukekipford.com/epic, and you'll see all the trips we have available. We also have a trip available for couples in September, and that's in Estes Park. My wife joins me on that one, and we focus more on how to have a healthy marriage and how to successfully raise your kids. Not that my wife and I have figured it all out, but we facilitate discussion around that, and it's all about helping people become better leaders in marriage, in parenting, and then, of course, with the men again in August. And there's the link, all right? lukekipford.com/epic. If you're interested, you can also pick up a brochure. And we literally, and I haven't lost anybody yet. There's nobody out there wandering around the mountains. We get them all off the mountain. We get most of the people to the top. Not everyone makes it, but it is an exciting time, and I teach leadership as we climb, okay? We stop every once in a while to get a break, and I'll do a little bit of teaching on leadership. All right? So that's lukekipford.com/epic. Folks, we're ready to jump into the being, which is on page 3 of your notes, all right? There's a heart at the top left, and we're going to start out by looking at the fruit of the Spirit. And this one here is where I want you to actually take a look at love, joy, peace, and say, how would I rate myself? Would I look at myself as, man, I know how to love people. I am such a loving guy. I'm going to give myself a 5. All right? Or would I put myself at a 4 on that one? All right? Or maybe all the way down to a 2. Just kind of self-evaluate yourself on that one, all right? For love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. When I think of my family pictured here on the screen, this is where this one really hits me, all right? Am I really gentle, for example, right? Am I gentle with my children? Am I gentle with my wife? Am I self-controlled? Would I talk about kindness? And then the question I have is, if you asked my family members to rate me on this, what would they rate? Maybe that's a better way to fill this out. Say, what do you think your spouse or your kids or your colleagues would say? So I'm just going to give you a minute there. Go ahead, fill it out. You can put your hand over it so nobody can see your self-assessment. All right. And then we're going to jump into what Jesus teaches us about each of those fruits of the Spirit. All right? All right, if you want to wrap that up, what we say at the heart level as we get into the being section is that if you don't get the heart right, you don't get anything else right. The heart is probably the most important part of our leadership. We can talk about knowing, all the right things to know, the doing, but we got to start with the heart. The heart is the being, and so that's where we want to focus on the fruit of the Spirit. And this is where we want to look at what the Bible teaches on each of those fruits. Okay? And so maybe what we'll do, you see the application questions cross there. You see that? That takes us back to page 1 where it says, what do we learn about Jesus' leadership? What do we learn about Jesus' disciples? What is Jesus teaching you personally? Some of those questions might not completely relate to each of those passages, all right? But at least some of them will. And what I would like you to do at your table, there are 9 gifts of the Spirit, right? What I'd like you to do is at your table, just kind of figure out, some of you will take 1 and some of you will take 2, all right? And just look at the passage, just kind of divvy it up among yourselves. One of you says, hey, I'll take the first 2, love and joy. The next one will say peace and patience. The next one, kindness and goodness. And then faithfulness and gentleness. And then maybe self-control is for one person. And you look up your passages, try to get the context of what's happening in those scripture passages, and see if you can figure out what Jesus is teaching us through his model, what he's teaching his disciples, what we learned from Jesus on those fruits of the Spirit. Because every one of them is a story or a concept in which he teaches us about that fruit of the Spirit. Then after you're done looking it up, all right, I'll just give you a chance to do it. If you want to share at your table, this is what I discovered. This is what I think this passage is teaching you. After about 10 minutes, I'm going to come back, and then I'm going to walk us through those passages really quickly. Is that cool? So we're going to see if you can discover what those are. This is self-discovery time. Once you've read the passages, looked them up, and say to your group, this is what I think this teaches us about love. This is what I think this text is teaching us on patience. All right? And see if you can discover it, and then I'll come back in about 10 minutes, and we'll walk through this. All right? Y'all got it? All right, go. I'll see you in 10 minutes. And those of you watching online, you've got the job of looking up all 9 passages in 10 minutes. You're going to have to be a speed reader, all right? Do your best, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. All right, folks, if you want to start wrapping it up, if you're watching online, you might want to start paying attention back to what we are going to talk about here again. What I'm going to do now is we're going to walk through these texts rather quickly and just look at how Jesus exemplified or demonstrated these fruits of the Spirit. The first one, John 15:12-13, greater love has no man than this. This is a passage where Jesus told us to love each other as he has loved us. And it's sacrificially for the benefit of the other person. So if you've got a child and they say, you know, Dad, if you really love me, you're going to let me eat chocolate for breakfast, lunch, and supper. Anybody got a kid like that? I don't want to eat my asparagus and my carrots and all that horrible green stuff that only rabbits eat. Are you kidding me? As a dad, if I love my son, I'm going to make him eat. I'm going to cause him to be disciplined in certain areas of his life because I truly love him. Does that make sense? I'm going to make him wake up when his alarm goes off. Well, that's the most unloving thing to do to a teenager, isn't it? No, because when he begins to work for his first employer, if he sleeps through his alarm too many times, he's going to lose his job. That's not a loving thing to do. It's not about letting the inmates run the prison. I do something for the benefit of another person. Does that make sense? Loving is not just doing what, it feels so nice. You got this. Love is also tough. Love is doing what's best for other people, right? Even to the point of laying down my life if it's for the better of the other person, all right? And so I want love not to be just this warm, fuzzy feeling. That's not what Jesus taught us. It's doing what's best for another person, all right? Even to the hurt. Luke chapter 10:21 is the next passage we're looking at with joy. Jesus, after the mission of the disciples coming back, he is full of joy, it says, and he says, I praise you, Father. It's hidden from the wise, the learned, but it's revealed to little children what you are doing, God. Jesus was so psyched about that. He was so joyful through the Holy Spirit when his disciples grew in their spiritual understanding. A serving leader gets pumped, gets excited at forward movement, right? And that person might make mistakes, but what they see is progress. I don't want people to read me for what I'm doing now. I want the people to read me and believe in me for what can happen, the potential. Let's just say anybody got a 1-year-old? Anybody got an infant? No. My grandbabies are kind of getting to that stage. And you know what happens when they start to realize that 4 legs bad, 2 legs better? In other words, they stop crawling and they start walking. They've watched this for like an entire year. And what happens? They get up off and they take one step and they fall. And you as a grandfather or a father, you'll walk up and you hit them over the head and say, what's wrong with you? You've been watching me for a whole year. Don't you get it? Of course not. You get on your phone. You're like, I can't believe it. Emmett took one step today. It was amazing, right? And you get so excited. And you know, mom and dad, they're coaxing the kid into 2 steps. This is the kind of attitude that a real leader has. They're full of joy. They're pumped when people get it. They're encouraging. They're positive. They're not negative. They're not critical. They're not tearing down. Pete, you are walking on water, man. You don't have to look at the wind and the waves. You can do this, Peter. You can do this. You of little faith. You've got a little bit of faith. Exercise it. I want to tell you something. I read that story completely different. It's not Jesus hitting Peter over the head. But it's Jesus saying, Peter, you were walking on water. You got this. You can do this. He restored Peter 3 times, every time for his denial. It says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, Jesus endured the cross for the joy set before him. A serving leader, it might be hard, it might be tough, but there's always joy in the morning, right? Joy comes in the morning. Leaders always are excited and positive and joyful. Luke 22:41-44, we're looking at peace. I like this one here because despite his personal will, Jesus has resigned himself to suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he has peace with the knowledge that his Father's will was best. When I was a kid, my parents had this coffee table book called the Sword Scrapbook. And there were all these stories and illustrations. And one of them was that these 2 artists were commissioned to draw a picture of peace. And the one artist, you know what they did. They drew the beautiful lake and the little tree by the lake and the little bird in the nest in the tree by the lake. There's not a ripple stirring. There's not a wind blowing. It's just absolute tranquility. That's what this one author said peace was. The second author did the same thing. They did the tree, they did the bird, they did the nest, but they did it in the context of a raging waterfall. A tree had fallen over across the waterfall. The water was like 10 feet away, roaring past, and nestled in the branches of that fallen tree was a nest with a mother bird and its birds. Now, let me ask you, which was the true picture of peace? How do you really test a leader? Put them under fire, put them in the storm, right? Do they still have peace? Jesus is in peace in the storm. He's sweating drops of blood, yet he is resigned. Yet he says, not my will, but yours be done. A serving leader, they can go through tough times. They can be faced with incredible difficulty, but they know the one who holds their hand. They know the one who has called them. They know that doesn't matter what happens, God's got this. Jesus has peace in the midst of a storm. John 21, 15 to 18, the fruit of the Spirit of patience. I love this one because this is where Jesus is restoring Peter. Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep. Feed my sheep, he says. 3 times he restores Peter. Patience because if you're a serving leader, sometimes those sheep, it doesn't matter how many times you've told them, they keep wanting to wander off, right? There's always one that wants to wander off. And as a serving leader, you got to be patient. Right? I'm done. No, we can't be done. We need to walk beside. We need to shepherd. We need to love. We need to care. Jesus showed great patience working with Peter, restoring him despite his failures, even his denial. And Peter turns out to be one of the key leaders in the early church. Luke 22, 49 to 51, we're looking at the word kindness. One of my greatest mentors was a man by the name of Dr. Dennis Kinlaw. We called him Papa. And I knew Papa up until he passed away at age 94. He was on oxygen. He was the guy that led he was the president at Asbury when the big revivals hit back in the 70s. I don't know if you heard about the revivals that happened recently. Asbury's been known for a lot of revivals, and he was president during the 70s one. A great man of God. He taught me so much. One of the things that in his one book, and he also taught me this. He said that. Malchus' ear. Do you remember a guy named Malchus? Jesus is in Gethsemane. The contingent comes with their swords, and they're going to take Jesus by force. And what does Peter do? He whips out a sword, and he's actually going for the head. But he misses, and he gets the ear, and he slices off Malchus' ear. You know what my mentor called that? He said that Malchus' ear was Jesus' love letter to the high priest. It's like, what? It was his love letter to the high priest. So think about the contingent going out, and they come back in with Jesus, right? And in they come, and Malchus goes to the high priest, sir, I think we have the wrong guy. I think we have the wrong guy. Well, what do you mean we have the wrong guy? Did we get him? No, I think we have the wrong guy. Well, what do you mean we have the wrong guy? Well, mister, we got out there to the garden, and this big burly dude named Peter took a swing at me and thankfully missed my throat, but he got my ear. And my ear was lying bloody on the ground. I was in so much pain. And then this guy that we captured, the guy that you wanted, Jesus, he went and picked it up, and he put it on, and he healed it. See how perfect it looks? What do you mean? We got the guy. That didn't happen to you. And my mentor said he thinks that was Jesus' love letter to Caiaphas. That Caiaphas, for the rest of his life, saw a man and probably had to fire Malchus. We don't know. But that's how my mentor called it. He called it Jesus' love letter to Caiaphas, saying, even in the moment of incredible trauma and suffering, Jesus was still kind. He was able to restore and to love the very one that was trying to destroy him. And he sent a love letter to Caiaphas. I liked how he described that. Malchus' ear is an act of incredible kindness in the midst. You know, when I'm going through difficult times, the last thing I'm thinking of is other people. I'm thinking of me, right? When I'm going through trauma and hard times. Jesus reached out with tremendous kindness. Acts chapter 10, 37 to 39, it says that Jesus was known for his goodness everywhere he went, including places where he was hated. He was known as kind of along the lines with Malchus' ear. Everywhere he went, he was doing good works, doing good works. What do people say when they hear your name? What do they think of when they hear your name? What was that, brother Aaron? Okay, start laughing. You know, what do they think about? When they thought of Jesus, he was the person that went around doing good works. He was known for goodness. You know what breaks my heart in the church today? Is that more people look at us for what we're against than what we're for. We are known in the world, and I know you can blame the media, you can do whatever you want, but we are known more for what we're against than what we are for. Folks, we got to change that narrative, right? There's a lot of things that I'm against. There's a lot of sins that I'm against, but I'm not against people. And people who are broken by sin, I am for them, and I will fight for you. I will do whatever I can to enter into your world with grace and compassion and love and mercy. That's what Jesus did. He was known for goodness. Why did people flock after him, and why don't people break through our doors to come into church and come to get to know you and seek out? Why is it? Is it because we're not known? And I'm not talking Calvary Chapel here. Apparently, you guys are like the big church in town, and everyone's coming. I think what you guys have going here, the reputation I hear is really good. It is. It's super good. Because you guys are about good works. You're about goodness, right? And I think we need to be known as a church where goodness exudes more than what we're against. There are things that we're against, but we should be known more for what we're for than what we're against. Goodness. Jesus was known for his goodness everywhere, it says in Acts. That was the testimony here. All right, the next one is faithfulness. Mark chapter 10, 32 to 34. Jesus is a great example of faithfulness in his calling. He went to Jerusalem despite knowing what would happen. I think in Mark 10, 32 to 34, is this the passage where it says that he fixed his gaze on Jerusalem? And his disciples are like, dude, they're going to kill you. Remember this? And it says that they wondered after him. They're perplexed. And Jesus fixes his gaze, and he just keeps going toward Jerusalem, and even knowing. He's faithful to what? His calling. Can you and I, as leaders, can we stay fixated on what God has called us to do, even when the chips are down, even when people are against us, even when everybody disagrees with us? Am I going to stay faithful? And we're going to jump into this after lunch. Well, we might get to it yet this morning. But this idea of who is my audience? Who am I here to serve? It's not people. Did you know that? Did you know that serving leaders are not here to serve people? Well, they are, but it's God first. And when you serve God, ultimately, people get served. Okay, they get served rightly. The reason that I have a lot of problem with some of the modern day Christianity is because people are saying, well, we need to love people. We need to love people. I'm going, yeah, but how do you love people? How do you love your son when all he wants is to eat chocolate? Do you let people continue in their brokenness? Do you let people continue in their shame? And do you let people continue in? And is that how you love people? By not helping people? And so Jesus is faithful even when nobody's following. And you and I are called to faithfulness when nobody wants to follow. We are called to take a stand for what's right because, folks, number one, our audience is not people. It's our audience of one, and that's God. When I put my head on the pillow tonight, I am not going to look back at you folks here today and say, did I make them happy? I'm not here to make you happy. I'm not here, honestly. Number one for me is God, to serve my audience. Did I speak the truth? Did I honor my audience of one? And I believe if I honor my audience of one, I believe I'll make you happy. If you're a follower of Jesus. If you're not a follower of Jesus, there's going to be some things you're going to disagree and you might be unhappy. All right? My goal in life is to honor my audience of one primarily. And when I do that, it will serve people. It'll serve them with their best in mind. All right, we got to move on. Faithfulness to our calling. Luke 18, 15 to 17. This one, gentleness. This is where Jesus took the little children, right? He took time for the insignificant children. Jesus, we don't have time for these kids. That used to be me, by the way. As a speaker, as a teacher, I always loved the higher grades in school. I didn't like to teach the young kids. And when it came to kids were a nuisance. I just, let them grow up a little bit, then I can reason with them, right? And I love kids. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying I didn't have time for children. And this has changed in my life. Now, when I meet a kid, and it's a young child, if I'm speaking in a public place, I'm invited to a church, a business, whatever, and there's a kid in the audience, like yesterday, we had this cute little Enos. Isn't that a great name for a kid? Enos, cute little Enos. And I got to know, we had several babies in the audience. But when they start to toddle, I like to get down on one knee, and I like to look them in the eye. And I like to fist bump them. Micaiah, will you work with me for a little bit? Will you come up here just for a moment? I know this is kind of nerve-wracking for you, Micaiah. You know what I love to do? I love to do this fist bump thing. So do this fist bump with me. And then I like to do this. Do you know what this is? Have I ever done this with you before? So let's try that again. Let's fist bump, and then we go back like that. And you know what that is? That's potato and French fries. Isn't that cool? Potato, French fries. All right? There we go. All right, you got it, Micaiah. Give him a hand. I've had to learn that children are really high in God's economy. Did you know that? We take time for kids. Jesus was gentle. The disciples are pushing them away, and he puts his hands on them, and he does what? He blesses them. I love the gentle Jesus. You know who he was really ungentle with? Religious dudes like me. The leaders, right? That's when the harshness came out, was toward religious super leaders. Okay? And man, that can be convicting. Am I gentle like Jesus? All right, the last one here is Mark 15:29-32. And this is self-control, folks. This one is powerful. Oh, my goodness. When people hurl insults at you, Jesus is on the cross. I think the last temptation of Jesus is the temptation to come off the cross. If you are the Son of God, if you really are, well, then come down off the cross. Think about what does the scripture say? He could have called legions of angels. I think we even sing a song, or at least I grew up with a song. He could have called 10,000 angels, right? He could have. Jesus could have done it. He could have come off that cross and he could have killed them all in one fall swoop. Jesus could have done it. He was God. He had power. I think the self-control that kept him on the cross is unbelievable. Can you imagine the sovereign maker, creator of the universe is being mocked by these puny little humans down here that he created? Self-control. Do I have self-control when people yell and scream and mock me? I had somebody text me one time, and it was actually about this material. And this would never happen in the U.S., so this actually happened up in Canada. But you know how it says in Scripture, you are without honor in your hometown? Okay, so some blogger, some do-gooder up in Canada said that this Luke Kipfer guy with his Lead Like Jesus material, this is not good stuff because Ken Blanchard is aligned with this, I think it was Norman Vincent Peale, who he disagreed on his theology, and since Norman Vincent Peale didn't get everything right, therefore Ken Blanchard's a bad guy, and because I was teaching Ken Blanchard's Lead Like Jesus material, therefore don't go to his event. And he had a blog and a following, and somebody sent me this stuff, and I was like, oh, okay. And I got to confess, and maybe, Mike, we should shut the cameras off for this one, because I'm going to tell you my spirit inside me. It was, you never heard that one before. That's what came out of me. I was angry, defensive. This is a number of years ago, by the way. You think God's still working on me? What do you think? I got a long way to go yet. By the way, I didn't choose to do that. Now, I use that. That's a horrible image, but I want to just tell you how angry I can become. When I believe in a message, I believe passionately that this is a message that the church needs to hear, people need to hear, and then somebody will have the audacity to not even check out the material and look what's actually being taught, but to make all these false statements and turn people off from hearing the truth. It made me angry. I would call that righteous indignation. And the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me and said, Luke, water off a duck's back. Water off a duck's back. Just let it go. You know, truth always wins out. Did you know that? I don't have to defend the truth. I don't have to defend Jesus. I don't have to defend this material. I don't have to defend myself. I didn't write anything. I never engaged. I didn't rip off and all. I'm so sorry. I should have never said that. That's a horrible statement. I want you to know I'm pretty human. That's what I want you to know. I feel strongly, and the fruit of the Spirit says, like Jesus, you don't defend yourself. You don't go after people. Truth is going to win. Jesus is going to win. I've read the end of the story. I don't have to defend myself. You know, folks, it's a lot easier to live when you don't have to defend yourself. It really is. I have there's a lot of people that have become critics of me. okay? Because I'm a public person. This is true about your pastor. This is true about the Calvary Chapel Church Network. This is true about any movement that's doing something good for God. You're going to get attacked. And you're going to get attacked by well-meaning Christian people. Did you know that? Some of your greatest critics are going to be Christians. And I've had to learn that. And I've had to learn to take the fruit of the Spirit and say, look at what Jesus did with this stuff. And I've had to learn how to respond with the fruit of the Spirit. Guys, this is God's work in my life. I'm not teaching this stuff today. I'm learning this stuff today. All right. Any questions on the fruit of the Spirit before we move on? We got 15 more minutes before lunch. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yep. We always love the sinner, not we hate the sin, we love the sinner. And honestly, guys, that's hard to do. It's all of us, isn't it? We always despise what's evil, and we love the person because the person's broken. That, you know, what I've had to do, folks, and I got to be honest with you, is I tell myself a different story. You know, when I hear about stuff like this, or if somebody cuts me off in traffic, I'm like, oh, I think their wife's 9 months pregnant and he's rushing to the hospital, right? The reason that person did that to me is because, well, the dog bit them on the way out the door today. Do you know what I mean? like there must be a reason why they just, you know, didn't wave at me with all their fingers or whatever it was. And so you tell yourself a different story. You forgive. You use the fruit of the Spirit. And that's one of the things I do. And I tell myself a better story. All right, it's at the heart level that we're looking at our identity and our self-worth. Let's take a look at the, we don't have it here. Okay, I thought I had a formula here. Well, I'm going to put it up on the screen, and you can put it in your notes, folks. This is really powerful. If Satan had a formula for my self-worth, it would be when my performance plus what everybody thinks about me, those two added together would equal my self-worth. Robert F. McGee came up with this. He said, if Satan had a formula for identity, for self-worth, my value, it would be based on how well I perform in life and what everyone's opinion is of me. Now think about that for a moment. How often do we base our decisions on what others will think of us? Do we really want to be defined by the sum total of how well we perform and what people think of us? This leads us to a key question. Who really are we trying to please in our leadership? Who is our primary audience? Will I say what needs to be said if I choose the wrong audience? Will I be a people pleaser? People are my audience. I'll be a people pleaser, won't I? So we either live to serve God as our ultimate audience of one, or we live to serve people. And when my identity is based on my performance, it's how well I perform. I want people to go, oh, look at, he's a good performer. It's all about what he does, right? What is God's formula for identity and self-worth? It's what he has done for me, in me. It's his righteousness on me, right? And it's not based on people's opinions of me. It's based on what God thinks of me. I'm going to give you a resource today on God's opinion on you, and it's powerful. We're going to practice this sometime during the day here. God believes some pretty cool things about you and me, right? That's where my identity is based. It's in Christ. It's not on what people think of me. When people are our audience, we lead from either pride, which leads to what? Self-promotion and self-exaltation, right? I climb this ladder. I self-promote. I lead from pride, right? I'm God's gift to mankind. I've got my act together. I'm Mr. So-and-so, and I lead from pride. I've got my act together. God, I don't need you. I've got it. Right? I lead from pride when people are my audience. I'm trying to make an impression. I'm trying to prove myself. Think about Jesus on the cross. Did he have to prove himself? That's a big temptation. Prove yourself, right? Jesus' self-control held him to the cross. Or we lead out of what? Fear and insecurity. This is a really big one. So what do? We self-protect. We don't want anybody to hurt us. So we walk away. We protect ourselves. We live out of fear. We're afraid of what people think of us, and so we will make decisions based on what people think, not based on what is right. Does that make sense? We either live out of pride or fear. Those are the two default mechanisms, and we will end up doing crazy things to either promote ourselves or protect ourselves. We please people if we think it will benefit us. Leadership is no longer based on doing what is right, but what will ultimately serve us. But when we lead to please God as our audience of one, something else happens. We recognize that we're simply stewards of our time. We're steward of our resources that he has given us, right? And now we lead with what? What's the opposite of pride and fear? What's it in your notes? Humility and courage, right? Humility and courage. We lead from a foundation of humility. Now I recognize what he has done. I recognize who he is. I'm humble because it's not about me. It's about what he has done. It's about what he's doing. And man, he actually invites me to join him. I get to partner. What did Jesus say? We are joint heirs with Christ in Ephesians. We become, I think he calls us friends and brothers. This is crazy. I'm a brother to Jesus. He invites us into this incredible, that should humble us. It's about something greater than us. And that causes me to celebrate what God has done. It makes me humble. And the second thing it does, it gives me courage. See, if I'm out to please people, people are going to shut me down, strike me down, talk me down, whatever. But if I'm out to God for his glory, he's my ultimate audience of one, God gives me courage, right? Me and God, we can do anything, right? He's not against us, he is for us. I've got this tremendous courage because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what people think of me, it doesn't matter what people do to me. What matters is what he thinks of me. It gives me courage. It gives me courage to speak out, to stand up. It gives me courage. Back to the business world, Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great. This was one of those famous business books that came out 15, 20 years ago. But he talks about a level 5 leader who led those companies from good to great. And he told his team, he said, I don't want you guys to tell me that it was all about leadership. He said, I'm so tired of hearing about leadership. And his team came back to him and said, Jim, every one of these companies that went from good to great were led by a level 5 leader. And what they discovered as they studied these companies is it was a leader who blended extreme personal humility with this incredible professional will. They were passionate. They were focused. Leadership was not about them. They were humble. But they had this incredible focus on accomplishing something. That's Jesus. Humility. And yet this incredible, passionate, intense, professional will. In Jim Collins' book, and I want to give you something practical here because I think this is really, really helpful. He said that Jim Collins gave us a metaphor for great leadership, and he used a window and a mirror. I don't have the window and the mirror in my notes. I thought I did. That must be some other notes that I've got. All right. So this picture here, you can kind of see the image mirrored, but he's also looking out the window. The window and the mirror, the reason this is so powerful is because serving leaders look out the window at their team and say, wow, look at the people that God has given me. Look at what we've been able to accomplish together, right? And they look in the mirror and they say, when things go wrong, they say, buddy, the buck stops with you. You blew it. You didn't lead well. You didn't train them well. What happens with the window and the mirror when you become a self-serving leader? You look out the window to blame your people, right? Adam and Eve, remember the garden? Adam is like, when God first brings Eve to him, it's like, wow, man, that's where we get woman, in case you were wondering. Some of you got that. That's okay. All right, it's not where we got it. But wow, he's just so excited about Eve, and they partner together. They name animals because Adam, I think, ran out of animal names. And so, Eve is there. By the way, let me just clarify something. The word helper, she is a helper to Adam, is not a subservient. It's not a negative term at all. It's the exact same Hebrew term that is applied to God as a helper to Israel. Okay, you guys are empowered. You're not less than or subservient. This is so important for us to understand that Eve comes into Adam's life as an equal and as someone to help, right? They're partnering together, and Adam, he's just got this thick skull, right? Like he has to see animals come by him 2 by 2 for a long time until he finally wakes up to the reality, I can't do this alone, right? Because guys are kind of like, I can do this alone. No, you can't. You need a partner. Right? And by the way, I'm not getting into marriage and singleness or anything like that. That's another concept. All I want to say here is that we as leaders, if we look in the mirror and say, buddy, it's all about your amazing leadership, you're incredible, and we don't acknowledge our team, right? This is a self-serving leader. Adam is wow, right? But then a few days later, when Eve eats the fruit, and by the way, why did Eve eat the fruit? Where was Adam? He was right there. He knew the instructions. He was a wimp, right? He gave up his leadership. He said, Eve, that's not a good idea. Here's why. Why didn't they have a conversation, right? And the moment that both of them took the fruit, what happens? Adam goes into blame mode. The woman you gave me. And what does she do? The snake made me do it, right? Have you ever heard the little ditty that says, Adam blamed Eve, Eve blamed the snake, and the snake didn't have a leg to stand on? And we've been saddled with blame ever since. And we blame the mirror, the window. I look out the window to blame my team. I'm self-serving. I look in the mirror and say, wow, you're amazing. No, a serving leader looks in the mirror and says, the buck stops with you. When things go wrong, it's your fault. And they look out the window when things go well and say, great job, team. Great job. I'm so glad that we were able to accomplish this together. All right? So courage. The second part of this is first is humility and then courage. We lead with confidence and assurance, knowing that God has equipped us for the work at hand, empowered us to carry out the mission. But when we lead with self, right, as our audience, or people as our audience, we end up with the negative outcomes of pride and fear. And what does that cause? It causes us to separate. Fear and pride always separates relationships. It separates it in marriage, separates it in business, separates it in church. We distort the truth. We twist the truth. We compare ourselves among ourselves, which is not wise, I think the scripture says. We have broken relationships. We get into comparison. But what happens when we lead with God as our audience? It actually draws people together, doesn't it? We have community. We have fellowship. We have contentment. We have an eternal perspective. Folks, we don't have time to watch this story from the Visual Bible, but I'll give you the reference here real quick. John 18:28 to 19:16. This is a story of Jesus on trial before Pilate. And I want to ask you the question right now. Who was on trial that day? Pilate was, wasn't he? Yeah, it wasn't Jesus on trial. If you go back and read that story, Jesus knows who he is, right? Pilate, do you know what authority I have? Do you know that I can take your life away? He's got this pride, this arrogance, he's an absolute leader with the self-serving thing. And Jesus knows who he is. He's calm. He talks about truth. Pilate doesn't get it. We read that story through the lens of fear and pride and humility and confidence. And you are going to see Jesus come through with amazing colors on confidence and humility. Right? Jesus says something real calmly. He says, you wouldn't have that authority unless it had been given to you from above. Right? And Pilate, he's this ego, and again, I'm sorry we don't have time to really look through this. But that to me is one of the great case studies in the Bible on this fear and this pride versus the humility and confidence. So if you want to write that passage down, John 18 and 19. All right, you're gonna find that story. Let's summarize what we've learned so far in terms of audience, how fear and pride affect our leadership. This, again, comes from Ken Blanchard and Phil Hodges in their book, Lead Like Jesus. They use the word ego as an acronym for edging God out. I like that. When we come back from our lunch break today, we're actually going to do an exercise, and we're going to have some fun with this thing on ego. All right, you're gonna enjoy this. It's going to be a little edgy, but it's going to be about edging God out, and we edge God out of the equation, don't we? Through fear and pride. What does pride say? I don't need you, God, right? And fear says, I don't trust you, God. I don't believe you've really got this. Pride, I can do this on my own. We edge God out through fear and pride, and we end up self-promoting, self-protecting. In essence, what we're saying is, I don't trust you. I don't need you. Edging God out. And what does it do? It always separates. It causes us to compare and distort reality. We edge God out. But Blanchard and Hodges also use ego as an acronym for, you see it? Say it together. Exalting God only. God has called me through my leadership, through courage and confidence, through humility, to exalt him with my leadership. So you can either have a negative ego or a positive ego. Isn't that great? I love what Hodges and Blanchard have done here. Edging God out or exalting God only through my leadership, right? I lead with humility when I look at the mirror at my team and say, look what we've been able to accomplish together for God's glory. God gives me this courage, this confidence, right? And he unites us together in fellowship and community and contentment with an eternal perspective. All right? We make the choice whether to exalt God only or to edge God out. What we would love to do for you today is to transform your ego. All right? Leaders deal with egos. And when we come back from the break, we're at 12:13. We're going to do an exercise. We're going to have some fun. We also have to keep you awake at that time of the day after you've eaten all that great food. So we're going to come back. And what we're going to do, John, is we're going to try to get the chairs set up during lunch in this formation. And we're going to do 2 different circles. So we'll decide where those circles are. So when we come back, we're going to be at we're at 12:15, 1 o'clock, 45 minutes. We are going to come back, and what I want you to do, you don't have to bring a pen, a paper, or anything like that. I just want you to come back to your chairs. You'll see 2 circles of chairs. We'll figure out where we put those circles. But there will be 2 circles, and just find yourself and just stand behind a chair in that circle, all right, and wait for further instructions. Is that cool? 45 minutes? All right, before you get dismissed, I want to talk about some of my resources over here. Now, guys, first of all, let me explain something to you. My mentor, Dr. Kinlaw, said, Luke, we don't have time for all the good books, only read the great books. All right? I am not pressuring you to buy my resources. It might not be the right time for you. All right? I am not in any way trying to over-promote, and because honestly, I've got all kinds of books on my shelf. So I'll let you know about my books. If you're interested, they are a good deal today. I typically sell these for around $15, $20 online at my bookstore. Today, they're all $10. Everything is $10 over there, okay? Except for some little scripture prayer booklets, and those are only a donation, whatever you want to do with that one. So the first book I want to talk to you about is Lead Like Jesus for Churches. And Ken Blanchard writes it in a story style. And he really is helping a church say, how do we rewrite our operating system as a church to become a Lead Like Jesus church? Now, you here at Calvary Chapel, I should have to be able to take all these books back with me because you guys are probably already there. But this is a great story of a church that said, how can we take these principles and integrate them into our church culture? All right, so that's what Lead Like Jesus for Churches is, and it's written as a story. It's kind of a fun book to read. And by the way, I can handle credit cards and checks and cash. And if you want to trade a goat with me, I could try to get that back on United tonight to Chicago. My wife will look at me kind of funny, and the flight attendants might, but I'll do whatever to make a deal with you, all right? And if you can't afford it, all right, talk to me. I'll see if I can help you afford it. And I'm not again, I think they're good deals, $10 for a book. My next one that I want to talk about are the Serving Leadership devotionals. I wrote was a Serving Leaders devotional based on the Gospel of Matthew. And I basically worked my way all the way through the text of Matthew. And it's an exegetical study on Matthew from a leadership perspective. So I teach leadership through the text. I almost go through every verse in the Gospel of Matthew and teach leadership. So that's what the devotional on Matthew. And then just last year, I came out with my second devotional on the Gospel of Mark. Again, same thing. Worked my way through the text and shared it from a leadership perspective, a serving leadership perspective. So 2 devotionals. And then last year came out with my first kind of bona fide book with my friend Fred. And it's kind of written in the Ken Blanchard style. We have a story in the beginning of the book, and then the last part of the book is kind of the meat, the teaching. What you are learning today is actually this book, right? This is a textbook for this seminar today. So if you're interested, this is book 1. You saw the 4 phases that we showed, leading ourselves. That's this one, becoming a leader worth following. This year we're coming out with book 2. We have most of it written, and it's building relationships of trust is what the next book is going to be out. We'll have it later this summer. And then Fred and I are coming out with book 3 next year on teamwork, and the 4th book is coming out in 2 years from now on an organization. So if you're interested, that is another one that's over here. My wife worked for Prayercast. We led a nonprofit organization. We believe in prayer. And so we put together 2 prayer resources. One is how to pray for your kids. It's a 31-day prayer guide, and you just put the name of your kid in the blank, all right? There's verses. We pray scripture over our children, all right? So it's a 31-day prayer guide. You can actually get this online for free if you go to reverbnetwork.org and look under resources. You can download it as a PDF, all right, if you want it as a PDF. And then this one here, because we've been involved with the nations around the world, it's scripture prayers for the peoples of the world. And it's, again, we chose special scriptures, and you put the blank in the blank, you put the name of the people group, and you can pray for the nations around the world. This one we actually have translated now into Ukrainian, Romanian, Russian, Chinese, traditional Chinese. I think we have it in Spanish. We have it, I think we have it in, I can't remember if it's in French. We have it in a lot of different languages. So this one's getting translated to get people praying for all the peoples of the world. Anybody still watch DVDs out there? A few of you do. Okay, all right. We have DVDs, all right? And these are, this one here, for example, was shot right here in Pennsylvania, and it was a Lead Like Jesus. These are all Lead Like Jesus events, 3 different Lead Like Jesus events where they had big-name speakers come in, like Ken Blanchard and Erwin McManus, and Henry Blackaby was here in Pennsylvania. And it was a Lead Like Jesus. It's like if you would go to a conference, you'd probably pay hundreds of dollars for this. And again, I know it's DVDs, it's kind of dated, but if you want some of this good teaching on DVD and you want to hear some great speakers talk about it, I've got 3 different ones, all right? And there are 3 different Lead Like Jesus events where they speak on these principles, all right? I think that's it. Any questions? Yes. Everything's $10 on my table. Yep. And typically, these sell for $20 or more, and same thing with my books online, but everything's $10 today. All right? Any questions? Yvonne, you want to come on up? And we are going to pray. We're going to dismiss for lunch. Yvonne's going to explain to us how lunch is going to work, and then we will see you back here at 1 o'clock. Is that cool? All right. And Yvonne, do you also want to pray a blessing on the meal? Where is that microphone? I know there was a microphone. Here we go. I have no idea how to turn. Please post your comments, send them as an email to me, and I'll send it with the rest of the group, what you're learning. Maybe we have something to learn from you that we've been missing here today. We would love to hear from you. We're going to take a 40-minute break right now. We'll see you back here at 1 o'clock. Thanks, Yvonne.
Hello.